Let's talk about something most people don't see until it's too late. How narcissistic husbands break down their wives. It never starts with yelling. It starts with charm, with attention, with words like, "I'm just looking out for you. I only want what's best for you." But that's not care. It's control disguised as care. And slowly, piece by piece, he starts taking away her freedom to decide for herself. The next step, confidence. He chips away at it. Maybe he mocks her dreams. Maybe he laughs when she shares an idea. Maybe he says, "You wouldn't understand." Just enough times until she starts believing it. And one day, she doesn't even recognize the woman in the mirror anymore because her voice has been silenced. Then comes the isolation. Friends stop calling. Family sees less of her. Why? Because he made sure of it. They don't really like you. They're jealous of us. Suddenly her circle is gone, and the only voice left in her ear is his. And when she tries to fight back, when she dares to say, "That's not how it happened," he twists reality. That's called gaslighting. He convinces her she's too sensitive, too dramatic, or even crazy, until she doubts her own memory, her own instincts, her own truth. Now, love becomes conditional. If she's obedient, she gets affection. If she questions him, she gets silence, rage, or rejection. Affection becomes a currency, and survival means earning it. Finally, he locks her in with guilt and dependency. He convinces her that every problem is her fault, that without him she'd be lost. And tragically, many women start to believe it. This is not love. This is dismantling, and it's one of the most silent forms of abuse. Because from the outside, everything can look perfect, but on the inside, she's being broken down piece by piece. So if you know someone going through this, don't say, "Why don't you just leave?" Say, "I see you, I believe you, you're not crazy, and you're not alone." Because the way narcissistic husbands break down their wives is the exact reason why they need someone willing to build them back up. Control disguised as care is one of the most dangerous and subtle tactics a narcissistic husband uses to break down his wife. It doesn't start with insults or shouting. In fact, it usually looks the complete opposite. It begins with phrases like, "I'm only saying this because I care about you," or "I just want what's best for you." On the surface, these words sound loving, protective, even selfless, but underneath, they carry a hidden agenda: control. At first, the wife may feel grateful. She thinks she's found a partner who truly pays attention to her, who notices things about her that maybe no one else has. If he comments on her clothes saying, "That dress doesn't really flatter you. Why don't you wear this instead?" She might interpret it as him wanting her to look good. If he questions her friends, saying, "I don't think they treat you right," she might mistake it for him being protective. And when he questions her decisions, how she spends money, how she spends time, she might believe he's simply being a responsible husband. But the truth is, these comments are not about care. They are about control wrapped in a ribbon of false concern. Over time, she starts making changes to keep him happy. She avoids wearing what he doesn't like. She sees less of the friends he doesn't approve of. She second guesses her choices because she doesn't want to face his subtle disapproval. What she doesn't realize at first is that every small compromise she makes is another piece of herself she hands over to him. The danger of control disguised as care is how invisible it is in the beginning. To outsiders, he might look like the ideal husband, attentive, involved, maybe even protective. To her, he seems like someone deeply invested in her life. But little by little, his words reshape how she sees herself. She begins to rely on his judgment more than her own. She trusts his criticism more than her instincts. She starts believing that his way really is better, that his voice really does carry more wisdom than hers. Once she believes that, she stops questioning him. That's the goal. A narcissistic husband doesn't want a partner, he wants control. By disguising his manipulation as care, he makes obedience feel like love and submission feel like safety. The wife feels she's being taken care of when in reality, she's being stripped of her independence. The ending is always the same. She wakes up one day and realizes she no longer knows what she likes to wear, who she wants to spend time with, or what she believes about herself. Because every choice she once had has been filtered through him. Control disguised as care doesn't just change her behavior, it erodes her identity. And the cruelest part is, by the time she notices, she may feel too weak, too doubtful, or too guilty to take her life back. That is the true cost of mistaking control for care. Erosion of confidence doesn't happen overnight. It's not a loud explosion, but a slow drip that wears someone down until there's nothing left. A narcissistic husband knows this well, and he uses it as one of his sharpest tools. He doesn't come out and say, "You're worthless." Instead, he takes small shots, delivered in moments when she least expects it, so subtle that she questions whether he even meant them the way they sounded. But over time, those small shots pile up, and the result is devastating. It can start with something as simple as a sarcastic laugh. She shares an idea at the dinner table, maybe something she's proud of from work, and instead of encouragement, he smirks and says, "That's cute." Just 2 words, but powerful enough to plant doubt. Next time, she might hesitate before speaking, and the time after that, she may not speak at all. He didn't have to scream at her to silence her voice. All it took was a steady pattern of dismissals. Sometimes it shows up as backhanded compliments. "You did pretty well for someone who doesn't usually get things right," or "I'm surprised you managed to handle that considering your track record." She hears the praise, but she also hears the sting. And the sting is what sticks. Soon she starts to measure herself against his low expectations. She no longer trusts her abilities because every time she tries, he reminds her that she's barely capable. Then comes the constant second guessing. If she makes a decision, big or small, he steps in to correct it. If she chooses a restaurant, he criticizes the food. If she buys something for the house, he points out what's wrong with it. If she parents in a certain way, he undermines her in front of the children. Slowly the message becomes clear. You can't do anything right without me. And eventually she starts believing that message. She asks his opinion on everything, not because she values his wisdom, but because she's terrified of being wrong again. What makes this erosion so damaging is that it's invisible to her at first. She doesn't realize that every jab, every laugh, every correction is stealing from her. Confidence is like armor, and when it's strong, she can withstand criticism, mistakes, even failures. But when that armor is chipped away, she becomes exposed. Without confidence, even the smallest challenge feels overwhelming, and that's exactly what he wants. Because a woman without confidence is easier to control. The worst part is that this tactic makes her blame herself. She thinks, maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I really am the problem. Instead of pointing the finger at him for tearing her down, she carries the guilt of not being enough. That's how deep the erosion goes. It convinces her that the cracks in her self-worth are her own fault, not the result of his calculated attacks. By the time she sees what's happening, the damage can feel irreversible. Her voice feels too small, her worth feels too fragile, and her abilities feel too uncertain. That's the cruel genius of a narcissistic husband. He doesn't just criticize her, he trains her to criticize herself. And when a woman loses her confidence, she loses the very foundation of who she is. That is the quiet destruction of self that leaves her trapped, believing she cannot stand without him, when in reality, she always could. Isolation from support systems is one of the most calculated tactics a narcissistic husband uses, and it rarely looks obvious in the beginning. He doesn't come right out and forbid her from seeing her family or friends. That would be too blatant, too suspicious. Instead, he plants seeds of doubt, slowly creating tension between her and the people who love her. At first, it may sound like concern. They don't think your friend really respects you, or your family doesn't understand us like I do. These comments seem small, but they serve a bigger purpose, pulling her closer to him while pushing everyone else away. Over time, these little remarks add up. She starts to feel torn. Should she trust her own experiences with her loved ones, or should she listen to her husband who insists he sees their true intentions? To keep the peace at home, she begins making quiet compromises. Maybe she skips a family dinner because he complains that he never gets enough time with her. Maybe she stops calling a friend as often because he says she spends too much time on the phone. These aren't her choices. They're the results of his subtle pressure, disguised as love and longing. The next stage is guilt. If she does try to spend time with people outside the marriage, he punishes her emotionally. He sulks, withdraws, or accuses her of caring more about others than about him. Sometimes he even starts a fight right before she leaves the house, forcing her to choose between calming the storm or keeping her plans. More often than not, she chooses to avoid conflict, which means she cancels her plans. Slowly, she learns that keeping him happy means limiting her contact with others. As the months or years go by, her world gets smaller. Her best friend stops calling as much because she's always busy. Family gatherings become rare because it feels easier to stay home than face the drama he stirs up. Even when she's physically present with loved ones, she might be emotionally distracted, worried about what mood he'll be in when she returns. He doesn't need to build a prison with walls and locks. He builds one with manipulation and fear. And she ends up living inside it. The tragedy of isolation is not just losing connection with others, but losing perspective. When she no longer has voices around her reminding her of her worth, her strength, and her independence, his voice becomes the only one that matters. Without support systems, she has no sounding board to say, "This isn't normal. This isn't healthy." Instead, she accepts his version of reality, which only deepens her dependence on him. And that's the point. A narcissistic husband knows that as long as she has people around her who love her, she has a lifeline. So he cuts the rope strand by strand until she feels there's no one left to turn to. The heartbreaking part is that by the time she realizes how isolated she is, reaching back out feels impossible. She worries people will judge her for disappearing, or worse, not believe her story at all. Isolation is never about protection, it's about power. And when a woman is stripped of her family, her friends, and her community, she's left standing alone in a cage he built, without ever seeing the bars until they're locked tight around her. Gaslighting and twisting reality is one of the most damaging tactics a narcissistic husband uses, because it doesn't just change how his wife feels about him. It changes how she feels about herself. This tactic is designed to make her doubt her own memory, her own perception, and eventually her own sanity. It starts with small denials, little contradictions that seem harmless on the surface. She says, "You promised we'd go out tonight." And he replies, "I never said that. You must be imagining things." At first, she brushes it off, assuming maybe she did mishear. But when this happens over and over again, Confusion takes root. The more she questions him, the more he insists she's wrong. If she remembers a conversation clearly, he'll swear it never happened. If she recalls something he did, he'll claim she's making it up. If she reacts emotionally, he'll dismiss her with, "You're overreacting," or "You're too sensitive." These responses aren't just about avoiding accountability, they're about training her to distrust her own reality. Each denial chips away at her certainty until she begins to rely on his version of events instead of her own. Gaslighting often escalates beyond words. He may move something in the house and deny ever touching it, or he may say one thing in private and the complete opposite in public, making her feel like she's losing grip on what's true. Sometimes he even recruits others into the act, convincing family or friends that she's forgetful, dramatic, or unstable. This leaves her not only doubting herself, but also feeling isolated because the people around her may begin to believe his version of the story. The real cruelty of gaslighting is how invisible it is. From the outside, no one sees the damage. They may even think she's the problem because she looks confused, anxious, or emotional. But what they don't see is the daily battle she's fighting inside her own mind. She starts keeping quiet, not because she agrees with him, but because she no longer trusts herself enough to argue. Silence becomes safer than the humiliation of being told once again that she's wrong or crazy. Over time, she loses faith in her own instincts. She second-guesses her memory of conversations, questions her reactions, and doubts her judgment. When you can't trust your own mind, you feel powerless. And that's exactly the goal. A narcissistic husband doesn't want his wife confident or clear-headed. He wants her dependent. If she believes she can't trust herself, then she has no choice but to trust him. This kind of manipulation leaves scars that go deeper than most people realize. Long after the relationship ends, many women still struggle with self-doubt, wondering if they imagined the abuse or if they exaggerated what happened. That's the lasting effect of gaslighting. It makes the victim her own enemy, questioning her truth even when the abuser is gone. Gaslighting is not a disagreement. It's not a difference in memory. It's a weapon. And when used consistently, it can turn a strong, self-assured woman into someone who feels like she's losing her mind. That's why it's so dangerous. Because the moment she stops believing herself is the moment he has complete control. Conditional love and approval is one of the most powerful ways a narcissistic husband keeps control, because it plays directly on the most human need, the need to feel loved. At the beginning, the relationship may feel intoxicating. He showers her with attention, compliments, and affection. She feels chosen, seen, even cherished. But over time, that love becomes less consistent and more like a switch he flips on and off, depending on her behavior. What was once freely given is now rationed like a reward. It starts small. Maybe she voices an opinion he doesn't like and suddenly he goes cold. No smile, no warmth, just silence. She doesn't understand what happened, but she can feel the shift. When she changes her tone, apologizes, or gives in to his way of thinking, the warmth comes back. Without realizing it, she's being trained like someone responding to a signal. Step out of line and you're punished with distance. Obey and you're rewarded with affection. Over time, this pattern becomes so normal that she adjusts her entire behavior just to avoid the punishment. The punishment isn't always silence. Sometimes it's anger. If she challenges him, he might explode, raise his voice, or give her a look that fills her with dread. She learns quickly that standing up for herself is too costly. Other times it's passive-aggressive comments or withdrawal, making her feel invisible until she bends to his will. No matter the form, the message is the same. His love is not unconditional, it's transactional. On the flip side, when she complies, he floods her with affection again. Maybe he praises her in front of others, tells her how much he appreciates her, or offers physical closeness. These moments feel intoxicating because she's been starving for his approval. They give her just enough hope to believe the relationship can still be saved. But it's not love she's experiencing, it's reinforcement, designed to keep her hooked on the cycle. This cycle of reward and punishment is one of the hardest traps to break. She convinces herself that if she just tries harder, just loves him more, just avoids saying the wrong thing, then maybe she can earn consistent love. But the truth is, the consistency never comes.